Thanks, Dave. I can't take credit for this one. Katie found it, this fabulous presenter. Katie Rhodes is doing a presentation and a workshop today on nutrition on the trail. Besides being a nutritionist, she's pretty much a legendary hiker. If you ever heard about her, how quickly her and her friend did the 46 High Peaks, it's quite the story. She's also the president of the Adirondack Mountain Rescue. She's a brilliant outdoorsman, a great nutritionist, and you're going to really like this workshop.
Bruce gives me too much credit, though. I'm not technically a nutritionist. I'm just a gigantic nerd that's really into nutrition. So everything is pure sourced. So I'll give you lots of equations and talk about studies and things like that. So it'll be great. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Like Bruce said, we are talking about nutrition on trail. I bring a little over a decade of experience on trail, both leading trips, as a guide, as an outdoor educator, and then just personally, my own adventures on trail. So we'll talk a little bit anecdotally about some of my experiences, what works for me, what I recommend to my clients, and then what the science says about nutrition and how we can use it to just be our best selves on trail. So like I mentioned, I'm a New York State licensed hiking and backpacking guide, wilderness educator. Like Bruce mentioned, I'm the president of Adirondack Mountain Rescue, and I'm also the owner of TogaNola Snack Company. So we are a very small snack company based out of the Saratoga Springs, New York area. My husband and I do all the baking, packaging, and we do oat-based products. And it feels really good because my products are always in my pack. So to be making a product that I know works and that I use myself is always a positive thing. I'm a mountain trail athlete, and then, most of all, I'm just a big, giant nerd. So I'll try to give you as much information today as I can without overwhelming you. So here's the plan. We're going to talk about science of fueling, science of macros. I'll try not to get too into the nitty-gritty. The importance of fueling, why it's so crucial, and why I'm so passionate about it, and why I go through these concepts with my guiding clients so thoroughly every time we're out. How to plan ahead and prepare for a trip from a nutrition standpoint, how to stock your pack, and then when things get messy, when things go wrong, how to troubleshoot what I've found, just to be the most effective ways to kind of come out of the other side of that. Right. So macros, we're going back to like 5th grade, nutrition classics here. We have 3 macros. Macros or macronutrients are very simply the nutrients your body needs in the largest quantities. So most people are familiar with these. We've got fats, we've got proteins, and we've got carbs. We're going to talk about each of these individually and how I utilize them on trail to fuel my body. And so we'll get started right off the bat with carbs, quick sustained energy. The human body is most efficient at processing carbs as fuel. A very basic little science lesson we'll do here. Carbs, they come into your body, the body processes them, turns them into glucose. If that's sent over to the muscles will use that immediately. It's also sent over to the liver. If it's not processed immediately, aka you're not actively hiking, walking, jogging, whatever it is that you're doing, then that is processed into glycogen and it's stored for later use. And so that's really useful because we can actually top off these stores, and that way we have quick access to glycogen rather than processing new carbs coming into the body when we're out there adventuring. So there's 2 types of carbs. We have our simple carbs and we have our complex carbs. If you're like me, you focus on complex carbs on a day-to-day basis. So you've got your whole grains, you've got your high fiber stuff, your veggies, your fruits, things like that. Those are awesome on a day-to-day basis. When we're adventuring, we actually want to focus on simple carbs. So we're talking about our white breads, our more processed foods, granola bars, things like that. Sugars is what we're looking at. I get a lot of resistance from my guiding clients that are health focused, saying that they don't want to access simple carbs in order to fuel their body because they're concerned about things like health effects and gaining weight and things like that. But when simple carbs are coming into the body, being turned into glucose and being immediately used for energy, that's not something that we need to be concerned about. What tends to happen is when we're living a sedentary life, we have carbs coming into the body, they're turned into glucose, they're not being used, they're stored as glycogen, and then when we have too much glycogen stored, we have an insulin spike, and then that's going to tell the body to convert that glycogen into fat for storage for down the road. And so that's where we kind of see that weight gain associated with simple carbs, and that's where they get a bad rap. But they actually are very, very useful for the times that we're on trail, we're exerting ourselves, and we're trying to be, you know, the best athletes really that we can be. So most people's glycogen stores last around 1.5 to 2 hours before we tap those out. So when you're exercising for longer than that period of time, about 90 minutes, that's considered an endurance activity. And the reason that it's an endurance activity is because you are going to be tapping out your glycogen stores by definition. So who here has been on trail exerting themselves for more than 90 minutes at a time? You are an endurance athlete. Congratulations. So whether you consider yourself one or not, you literally are an endurance athlete when you're doing these activities. And if you think about your favorite athlete, football player, soccer player, whatever it is, if they chose to sabotage their own performance, what would you think? That's weird. Why would they do that? Why would they not live to their full potential and play the best game they could, do the best hike they could? So when I see what, you know, most people consider like the average hiker think, oh, well, nutrition is not important to me. I'm just hiking at a slow pace. It doesn't make sense because what you're doing is exerting yourself. You're doing it in an endurance capacity, and all you're doing is sabotaging yourself, your performance, and your enjoyment of the trail if you're not doing it properly. So it is really important. So what happens if we don't fuel properly as endurance athletes? Who here has been on trail and you're slogging along and it's the end of a long hike, and maybe you look ahead and you think you see the trailhead and you get really excited, and then you realize it's a mirage. Has anyone here done that? Who here has been on trail at the end of a long hike and just lost their will to live completely? Yeah, same. What's happening there is what we call bonking or hitting the wall, and what it is from a scientific standpoint is glycogen depletion. So what's happened is you've tapped out your glycogen stores and you haven't replaced them. And this has a really interesting effect on the body because the body essentially goes into crisis mode. It doesn't want you to fully tap out your glycogen stores, and it gets really concerned about your brain. And the reason for that is the brain is not able to access the glycogen in your muscles, it's only able to access the glycogen in your liver. So when your glycogen stores are tapped out, all of a sudden the brain doesn't have the energy coming in, and it goes, big deal, we're gonna die. And then it sends you all these terrible signals like feeling very sluggish, fatigued, and so you start to experience physical things like, you know, peripheral or muscle cell glycogen depletion, and so that's going to be fatigue in the muscles. That's what most people think of when they think of bonking or hitting the wall. But what's happening, even more interestingly, is central nervous system fatigue. And there's a whole set of studies that have just come out in the last few years where scientists have realized when you're experiencing glycogen depletion, it's way beyond muscle fatigue. It actually depletes your brain. You start to get confused, some people have hallucinations, you can't make good decisions. This sounds like a great start of a SAR incident, doesn't it? And so this is the other reason that I really drive home with my guiding clients how important it is to make sure you don't go into this glycogen depleted state. Is because some of the subjects in these studies that they've done where they've totally depleted their glycogen levels and then tested their central nervous systems, they couldn't read anymore. And if you can't read a map. And if you can't read a map, you can't navigate. And now you're going down a whole road of some serious issues. So the other thing that can happen, and I have this a lot with my guiding clients, is somebody who's maybe very health conscious will come to me and they'll want to hike, and I'll keep reminding them to top off their glycogen stores, to have that snack or eating every hour, and they don't want to do that, or they don't want to do it in an effective way. And when I probe them about it, they'll say, oh, I'm on a diet. And so what can actually happen is if every time you're going out and exerting yourself, you're denying yourself these glycogen stores and you're actually depleting yourself over and over again, you can create a situation where you have a reduced basal metabolic rate. And what that means simply is you're telling your body there are limited resources, and so when you're at rest, you're reducing the amount of calories that you're burning. So what ends up happening is these people that have come to me, they don't want to listen, they don't want to take in the calories. When they get done with the hike, they're extremely glycogen depleted. They binge, and then when they do this over and over again, they're actually creating a situation where they're creating weight gain. So it actually goes against the whole principle that they're trying to bring into practice anyway. So respecting your body, respecting your brain enough to really keep those glycogen stores up. All right, I'm going to step off my pedestal about that now. So my soapbox up here. The next thing we're going to talk about is protein. So protein stores cannot be accessed as readily as carbohydrate or glucose stores. Really where protein comes into play is in the recovery. So studies have shown that protein consumption during especially the late stages of activity and immediately following activity lead to reduced muscle breakdown and overall quicker recovery from that activity. So if you're the type of person that if you go out and you do a high peak and you're feeling really, really sore the next day, it might be something that you want to look at. Have I gotten enough protein throughout my activity, throughout the adventure? Have I gotten enough protein and had it soon enough immediately after my hike is concluded? I know a lot of people that will jump in the car and then make the 3, 4, 5 hour trip home and not have anything in that time and say, oh, I'm just going to wait till dinner when I get there. But timing is really, really important when it comes to protein, especially for women. So studies show that the time frame for women to get an initial burst of protein following activity is 20 to 30 minutes. So if you're not getting that at least 30 to 50 grams of protein 20 to 30 minutes after your activity has concluded, you've lost a window of recovery right there. Your cells just are not going to accept the protein in the same way after that time frame. Men have a little bit longer. They probably have 30 to 60 minutes, depending on which study you read. And then after that, within 2 hours, the general recommendation is going to be to get additional protein within a full meal, pairing that with carbohydrates. So if you're someone who jumps in the car and waits till you get home, then that's might be something you want to consider, especially if you're feeling sore and you're feeling like you're not recovering after a hike. Let's see, what do I want to say about protein? So at least 240 calories or 45 grams of protein, 20 to 60 minutes, again, depending on if you're a man or a woman. And then you want that heavy meal within 2 hours. All right, fat. So we don't want to forget about fat. It's the last macronutrient we haven't talked about. I call this the energy safety net. The body is able to use fat pretty readily if glucose stores are depleted. So having a good store of fat in the body ahead of time is going to be really a safety net if you happen to become depleted at some point during your adventure. The problem with fat is it's not readily digestible. So the body has a hard time digesting it. It digests it very slowly. So optimally, we're going to get our fat stores topped off pre-trip, or if you're on a through hike or multi-day trip, then you're doing that during dinner. A lot of through hikers like to take along things like olive oil packets, ghee packets, butter packets, and just dump those in their dinner just for some additional calorie dense, just fat stores to go ahead and get in their body. So really, the 3 macronutrients are going to work as a system. They're all important in order to continue to fuel you throughout your adventure. I like to use a fire analogy. So our fat is going to be like our backlog. We collect it ahead of time. It's going to be slowly burning in the background. Our cordwood, it kind of sustains the fire. That's our protein. You want to keep topping that off, but that's going to burn a little bit more quickly than the backlog. And then our carbs are going to be our tinder and our kindling. So that really is going to get things started. And a good analogy is important. So gotta throw that in there. All right, so let's begin at the beginning. Things we can do to set ourselves up for success before we even step on trail. Carb loading, it's not just for marathon runners. So I am a huge proponent of carb loading. It's a great excuse to just stuff your face with bagels for days before your adventure. And when people ask you about it, you can be like, oh yeah, I'm going for a really good hike. Don't worry about it. Bagels are about 50 grams of carbs, so they are a heavy hitter. Pretzels, cereal, a cup of cereal is about 30 grams of carbs, so that's an easy way to get your carbohydrates in during this carb loading process. 1 cup of rice is 45 grams, 6 gummy worms is 30 grams of carbs. So you can really you can sneak these things into your diet intermittently in the days leading up to your adventure. General recommendation is loading 1 to 3 days before. I'll go as many as 5 days before I go out if it's something really strenuous where I'm going out for multiple days. And 7 to 10 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight. So just to give you a quick example, I weigh about 150 pounds, that's 68 kilograms. So I'm going to load with 400 to 700 grams of carbs per day leading up to a big adventure. And again, I'm sneaking these things in around my normal diet, like an extra bagel in the morning, an extra piece of toast during a meal, that sort of thing, adding in extra snacks. The other thing is, as we get closer to our adventure, we want to focus on low fiber foods. That means simple carbohydrates. So yes, I'm telling you, you should be eating white bread, you should be eating sugar-based products as you're leading up to the adventure. High fiber foods are going to end up giving you GI distress if you're going out and you're exerting yourself. So it's not something we should be doing all the time. I don't know of any nutritionist out there that is a proponent of, not eating whole grains on a regular basis, but just the times before and during these big adventures that you have planned, it's a good idea to focus on those low fiber alternatives and just kind of let yourself, feel like a little kid again and eat that sugary cereal. And, it's a good psychological thing too, to let yourself go a little bit during those times. Pre-hydrating, again, there is a reason I'm talking about hydrating during a nutrition talk, and that is because it doesn't matter how well we fuel ourselves, if we're dehydrated, it actually disrupts pancreatic enzymes and stomach acid production. So we can be very well fueled, but if we're severely dehydrated or even moderately dehydrated, the body's working much harder to process that food, and that can actually lead to GI distress. So pre-hydrating helps a lot if you have a hard time getting in enough fluids while you're on trail. I have a lovely little equation up here, if anyone wants to get very precise with it, where you can actually calculate based on your body weight how much fluid you should be taking in the morning of your adventure before you hit trail optimally. We don't want to get to the point where we're sloshing fluids in our stomach, but we do want to be nice and hydrated ahead of time. So allowing yourself enough time to process those fluids before you start. And last but not least, the morning of. So we've carb loaded, we've pre-hydrated, we're ready to go on our adventure. The morning of, you don't want to start with an empty stomach. You want to set yourself up for success. So the general recommendation is going to be 300 to 500 calories, and that's going to be 1 to 3 hours before your adventure starts. You want to focus again on low fiber foods, simple carbs, mostly carbohydrate based with a touch of protein, just to kind of keep that stomach feeling full. So there's some examples of some things. Again, you can tell I really love bagels, really into bagels. Pop-Tarts, that's another one where a lot of people, adults, push back a lot and they're like, I can't eat a Pop-Tart. That's terrible for you. Your body's not even going to know that Pop-Tart went in your mouth, you're going to burn it so fast. It's going straight into glucose and turning into energy for your muscles. So it's not something in this case where you have to be too concerned about it. Oats is another big one. It's really high bang for your buck. So a cup of oats is 60 grams of carbs. And that is why I love my oat-based products so much. Because they're fairly lightweight and they also are just, a lot of carbs per unit for those. My go-to in the morning, I have a snack company that I own. We make granola clusters. So I'll have, a cup of clusters in the morning. I'll add in some berries, some bananas, things like that, and then I'll add a hard-boiled egg. So that's kind of my go-to pre-adventure meal. So I know I'm always getting enough calories and always getting enough carbs. All right, so how much is enough? that's kind of the next question. The standard recommendation is for every hour of exertion, every hour on trail, 200 to 300 calories and 30 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. And I know what you're thinking. That's a lot. And it is a lot for 99% of the people that I come across. They're like, you want me to eat how much? There's no way. And I totally agree. Now that you have this information, you'll be tempted to go out on trail next time and start shoving food in your mouth every hour. Please don't do that. It's not going to work out well for you. Your gut needs to be trained like any other organ of your body. So before you go out on trail, you're going to train your legs, right? You're going to train your muscles. The gut's the same exact way. You've never asked it to process this many calories per hour before while you're exerting, and it's not going to know how. What usually happens to the gut is while we're exerting, the body goes, oh, we need blood and muscles. And so it takes all the blood in your gut, most of the blood in your gut, not all of it, that would be bad. And it diverts it to your muscles so that your muscles can work more efficiently. You have to teach your gut that no, we need to keep some blood in the gut so that we can effectively digest. And if you've never really been the type of person that eats while you're out on trail, right now your gut doesn't know that's what it needs to do. And so you're really gonna overwhelm it if you try to suddenly start just slamming all these carbs and calories into it. So we're gonna start small, we're gonna start with numbers a little bit lower than this, and then you kind of try to build up from there. And every time you go out, you take it a little more. How did that go? Did I have GI distress? Did that feel okay? And then you just start to build up. I'm at the point in my career where I've been doing this for a very long time. I take in about 500 calories an hour if I'm, doing something where I really need to perform. So you can get there, you will get there if it's something that you train, just like you're training your legs to do these big adventures. So just some examples of things that we can take in on an hour-by-hour basis. Gels, chews. These are not just for runners. I see a lot of success in my hikers, especially if you're someone who's traditionally had issues digesting while you're on trail. Gels can be a really gentle way to get in a high number of calories and carbs. Just pop it in your mouth. You don't even have to, taste it if you don't want to. Swallow it down, and now you've got that in your stomach. You also want to be thinking about your carb to protein and fat ratio. So generally, my recommendation to my clients is always about 75% carbs and 25% protein on that hour-to-hour basis, especially after you hit that 2-hour mark and you've depleted those glycogen stores and you're going to start restocking again. We want to make sure that we have just a little bit of protein in there with your carbs for that recovery and just that lasting energy. So before we leave on our adventure, we want to make sure that we are calculating the right number of carbs to put on our back. If we bring too much food, that gets really heavy and we're actually depleting our glycogen stores more quickly. If we don't bring enough food, then we risk bonking. So this is a handy little equation, me and my equations, right? I gotta bring them in. That we can use to just calculate how much time that you expect to spend on trail. This is called the Nasmyth's equation, or the Nasmyth's rule. So Nasmyth was a Scottish mountaineer, and he came up with this in order to kind of vaguely capture how much time a particular trail would take. And his rule says the average fitness person can walk approximately 3 miles per hour on non-technical flat trail. And then he says if you're actually going uphill, you want to add an hour for every 2,000 feet of elevation gain. Again, this is for non-technical trail. So for us here in the Adirondack area, the Catskill area, any sort of trail that you'd be in this local area where you have rocks and roots and other technical things that you have to deal with, that's going to slow you down quite a bit. If you've been in the high peaks before, you know what I'm talking about. You're not doing 3 miles an hour up there, right? So we want to make sure that we consider those factors. For my clients, I generally am guiding in the high peaks. For the average fitness person, I'll assume around 2 miles per hour, and I'll assume about an additional hour for every 1,000 feet of elevation gain, because that really is going to consider those technical aspects and how that's going to slow us down. So once we have our approximate time on trail, we're going to multiply that by our calorie needs per hour, and that is going to give us the number of calories that we, in theory, are going to be eating while we're on trail. I always encourage everyone to pack extra emergency calories on their back. You never know what's going to happen. I'm the president of the SAR team, I have to say that. So adding in an additional, 500 calories or so is usually a safe bet. And then see if you can eat it all. Like that, that can be your goal. Once you've calculated this amount, you know how much you're supposed to be getting down. Challenge yourself to that, am I actually going to be able to get these calories down? And you can kind of make a game out of it at some point. If you're on a multi-day excursion, then you need to understand how many calories you're going to need per day rather than just during the times of exertion. So these are graphs from a very popular nutrition company that they released to kind of help people with these calculations. The graph on the left is going to be calculations for men, and the graph on the right is going to be calculations for women. A little bit archaic, but we can say the one on the left is for folks with higher body mass, the one on the right is going to be for folks with a little bit lower body mass. And you can see that high activity section of the graph, that's where we're going to be when we're doing these hikes. These are high activity situations. It might not sound like it, especially if you're someone that maybe moves a little slower on trail, but if your heart rate is elevated, then you're going to want to be in that upper range of calories per day. So again, I'll use myself as an example. I'm about 150 pounds. I'm going to be on the right-hand side of the screen on that graph, and it's going to indicate that I'm going to need at least 2,600 calories a day. I would argue that that's on the low end, and I would definitely cap closer to 3,500 calories a day for myself. So that can just kind of give you an idea of, this is what we're looking at from a numbers perspective. How am I doing in terms of, getting calories into my pack? So let's talk about actually stocking the trail pantry. I'm going to give you just some stuff that works for me, some stuff that kind of fills these niches of mostly carbs, a little bit of protein. I'm a big fan of real food. I'm primarily a trail runner, so I like things that I can just put in my hand and be kind of running and eating. If you guys know any ultra runners, mashed potatoes is a huge hit with those folks. For good reason. They're high in carbs, they're super easy to digest. Pierogies I have found to be like this magical pocket of mashed potatoes. It's the most wonderful thing. And you can hold them and hike and run and do whatever your chosen activity is. They're super convenient. And you've got these lovely mashed potatoes wrapped in carbs. In pasta. So those are really fantastic and they work really well for me. You can even get the ones that have like bacon and cheese in them. A little extra flavor, kind of fulfill that, that salt tooth that you might have while you're out on trail, and also just getting that little burst of protein. We do want to focus on things that are calorie dense, especially for dinner time, because that's going to be your biggest bang for the buck in terms of the calories versus the weight ratio on your back. Onigiri is my other go-to real food, so if you've never heard of it, it's a traditional Japanese preparation. It's really a rice ball. I take sushi ginger, I wrap it inside along with some miso paste, so I'm getting a lot of good electrolytes. The ginger settles the stomach, I wrap it in the rice, and that whole thing is wrapped in seaweed. And then again, you can just, carry it in your hand. You've got like this lovely, just little packet of nutrition and carbs and ginger to settle the stomach, and it's really fantastic. Some other things that work, I've got these, I don't know if can I get this off? There we go. I've got a few examples up here. It's kind of dark, but I do have examples of some of the foods that I kind of use standard. Honey stingers or stroop waffles are another big one. That's a go-to, that's easy to digest. If you're someone who has a lot of GI distress, I talked earlier about gels not just being for runners. Spring Energy makes these really fantastic. They're almost like baby food packets, but they're super high calorie. Oh, thank you. My go-to is Awesome Sauce, it's called. It tastes like applesauce. It has 200 calories in a packet. And so it's a lot of, bang for your buck in terms of weight. It goes down really easy. Even when I have the most GI distress, I can get one of these down and they taste good. Of course, oat-based products, always. Anything that is, like a granola bar that's got any sort of like sweetener in it, anything like that is going to be great. Maple syrup. Has anyone ever done this? Just drank maple syrup on trail? Am I the only one? Do try this next time. They come in these fancy little packets. You don't have to do this. You can get like your own little container and bring it. Straight maple syrup, very high in carbs, high in calories. It sounds kind of weird, but I'm telling you, try this and then email me and tell me how awesome it is. The other thing I like to do is bring along, these are my go-to breakfast essentials. You guys know what these are? They're like, they tell you they're high in nutrition and they get your vitamins and your, it's like chocolate milk powder. And they tell you it's good for you. On trail, that's definitely one of my go-tos. I mix it in my coffee in the morning. It's over 200 calories, and now you've just got that in your system just drinking it. So you guys are welcome to come up afterwards and take a look at this. I'm not, well obviously I own TogaNola snack company, but I'm not like sponsored by any of these companies. These are just things that I use in my pack, and it's helpful to kind of have them visually in front of you. So yeah, that's just some examples of the sorts of things that I use. Trickle method. So especially if you're having GI distress or you're someone that's not used to eating regularly, we don't want to be doing big meals. We want to be trickling those calories in. That's why I like the hour by hour standard, that 200 to 300 calories per hour, because it makes you think to stop and get that calorie count in hourly as opposed to waiting until lunch, waiting until dinner. I see this a lot with my guiding clients. I'll say, okay, you know, it's been an hour, let's go ahead and take a break and get our calories in, and they'll say, oh no, the summit's right there, I gotta get to the summit to eat. Even though it's gonna be like 60-mile-an-hour winds, you gotta get to the summit to eat, you know? It always takes longer than you think to get to the summit. So, you know, stopping when it makes sense from a time standpoint to stop is really gonna be the best choice. Winter considerations this time of year. Has anyone broken their tooth on a Cliff Bar before? Anyone got to the backcountry and had your really tasty, you know, whatever it is, your granola bar, your pretty much anything, and went to take a bite and you couldn't even chew it? It was a block. That happens a lot, especially up in the Adirondacks where it gets very, very cold. We need to be making sure we consider moisture content when it comes to the foods that we're selecting. I like to do what I call the freezer test. So if I'm getting ready to go out for a winter hike, I've never tried a particular food before. I chuck it in the freezer for a couple hours, I take it out, and I try to take a big bite out of it. And if I'm not able to do that, then I know it's not going to work on trail. Fortunately, ladies, we have a built-in heated pocket. Men don't have that. In pockets can be a good solution for that. Just anything to get your body heat to be warming those foods so that they're actually edible. If you can't eat your calories, it doesn't matter that you brought them with you, right? So we want to make sure we're thinking about that ahead of time and stocking them inside your coat, inside your pockets, letting that body heat thaw it out before we realize we're starving. Okay, last but not least, troubleshooting. So what happens when things go wrong? Dehydration, I mentioned earlier, can be a big factor. Oh, thank you, I should have prompted that. Can be a big factor in not being able to process the calories that you're getting in. If there's food in your stomach and your body can't process it efficiently, it's not going to feel good. It's going to sit there and it's going to cause GI distress. So making sure you're hydrated, the general recommendation is going to be 16 to 20 ounces per hour. Again, that probably sounds like a lot, but that scientifically is what we should be taking in while we're exerting. Another factor is electrolytes. So electrolytes are going to be things like potassium, magnesium, sodium. These things, when we're depleted, it's going to cause things like GI distress to come up. And this happens a lot, especially in runners, where you think you're bringing in enough water, but you're actually depleted on electrolytes, and that's the issue. And what happens is electrolyte sickness, or the condition that comes along with electrolyte depletion, it presents itself as dehydration. And so you think, oh, I'm dehydrated, I need more water. You bring in more water, you bring in more water, you're actually diluting the electrolytes further in your system, and you're exacerbating the issue. So that's just something to be aware of. It's something that I'm prone to, I've experienced before. I've had full-blown hallucinations on trail from electrolyte sickness. It's very serious. And if you're solo, it can be a real issue because your brain is not working correctly. Let's see, what else? So we talked about reduced blood flow to the GI system. That's something we want to be training ahead of time. high fibers too close to exercise. NSAIDs is another big one. I've had this issue before where I had an individual I was guiding. We were coming back from Allen Mountain. Is anyone familiar with Allen? Yeah, 18 miles, right? It's like super short, easy hike, right? We were coming out, she was pretty fatigued, she was pretty sore, and she was taking NSAIDs, and she was also not taking in calories properly. And she just was feeling very, very, very ill. By the time we got out, we got into my car, we started moving, and, well, let's just say the inside of my car got a good spray. It was not a good situation. So that's one that I feel pretty strongly about. It's just being careful with, you know, how much painkillers you're actually putting into your body and the effect on your stomach lining that can happen. High fat, again, our body's not able to process it very effectively, so if we're doing that too close to exercise, if we're doing it during high exertion times, then we want to just be careful. And then stress and anxiety can actually be a big factor too. So if you're someone who's nervous about the activity you're doing, one of the big things that I like to do on trail when I know that I'm going to be exerting pretty heavily, I expect GI distress, just because that's a common issue for me. I always bring ginger tabs with me, so the ginger people make these great little ginger tabs. I actually have them with me if you want to see them. You just chew them down, soothes the stomach pretty readily. Pepto-Bismol tabs always go in my pack, in my first aid kit. And then if things are really bad and your GI distress is to the point where you actually can't bring in calories and you're at risk of glycogen depletion, recent studies have shown that you can actually hold carbs in your mouth, and the permeation through the lining of your cheeks and your tongue will actually trick the brain into thinking that carbs are coming in, and your brain will start to function more readily because it's not as fearful of glycogen depletion. So you can actually trick yourself into functioning at a higher level until you're able to get out or able to start getting calories in. One of my favorite tricks, especially when I'm experiencing GI distress, is going to be using liquid calories. This is one of my go-tos always, where I'm bringing in probably about half of my calories in liquid form. So products like Tailwind, Gnarly 2.0, they are powdered products. You actually add them to liquid. They contain calories, they contain electrolytes. You're drinking your calories while you're hydrating. And it's a simple way, a way that's very easy on the stomach to bring in calories. All right, I have absolutely pummeled you guys with information. So I'll call it there. Happy to take any questions you have. My contact information is up here. I'm on Instagram. I try to keep my page somewhat updated. I'm currently guiding with Rock and River Guide Service. I am president of Adirondack Mountain Rescue. You can always reach out to the team. And I'll just go ahead and plug right now, we're always looking for volunteers with the team. We're currently working hard on getting our public education sector up and running a little bit more readily. So we are looking for educators, we're looking for public speakers, always to join the team. So if you know someone, have them reach out. All right, thank you so much. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time. Yeah.
Does nutrition get impacted by either hiking in the desert or hiking in the winter mountains?
From a hydration standpoint, absolutely, yeah. I would also say temperature should be taken into consideration. I know personally when I overheat, I tend to get GI distress, and then I'm taking in fewer calories just as a result of that. And so that's where liquid calories become a huge play for me. Whenever it's hot out, most of my calories are in liquid form.
Katie, can you repeat the questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, does hiking in the desert and hiking in the winter, so essentially hiking in fluctuating temperatures and locations, affect nutrition? Thanks.
So hiking with children from 5 to 12 years old, follow the same rule? Or maybe I guess 45 minutes versus 30 minutes?
My take on it would be that you can still stop more regularly, definitely, if they tend to be accepting of that sort of thing. I know some kids, they just like want to get along. At least once an hour fewer calories. I wouldn't try to force them to get down as many calories and carbs as an adult, of course. This is a great time to just let them pick out their favorite candy at the gas station before you get there, right? Like those are good, simple carbs that's gonna fuel their body. This is their treat. And it kind of makes them a little bit more excited about hiking, I'm guessing. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to repeat the question again, didn't I? I'm so sorry. The question was about children hiking. If you should be following the same rules. I'll try to be better about that if I get another question. Okay, cool. You guys are welcome to come up and take a look at the products, ask any additional questions after the fact, and I'll hand it over to
Katie, thank you very much. That was a lot of information. I found it very interesting. Thanks. We're going to take a short break for about 10 minutes, not much more than that. We've got a short business meeting, 5 minutes. That'll start